What is up? What's going on, guys? It's been a minute, but we are back. And you know what that means? It's time for some Macroverse updates. Anyways, I'm Tiny Universe. This is Tiny Universe, if I can talk straight. And it's been much too long. I'm so glad to be back. This is long overdue, and hopefully we can get back to a bit of a regular schedule. Um, I don't want to waste any time at all, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into bringing in my good friend, Mr. Eben.
Yoink.
Yoink.
How's
What's
it going,
going on?
It's going good. I think our weekly show has been a monthly show, but it's all good. There's
I'll tell you,
a lot going on.
the last couple months have just been back to back busy, and
Totally.
I think I'm getting a little bit more free time now. So I don't know. Hopefully, we'll get back to a weekly schedule. Hopefully, but
That's the hope. So we'll be. I'd say what we should probably say is we'll be monthly, and sometimes we'll be bi-monthly, and sometimes we'll be tri-monthly,
so
and sometimes we might be quad-monthly.
I was gonna say depending too. I mean, on what's going on. Sometimes it's hard to get on every single week and have some kind of big update for everybody. So, but I still miss talking and chatting and catching up. So,
yeah, absolutely.
No, man, I'm glad to be back on and hanging out.
Totally. Well, let's give a little context since it has been a minute, a little reset. So I'm Eben Matthews and co-founder and CEO at Macroverse. Tiny introduced himself, Tiny Universe, aka
Scott Pierpont.
one of the real OGs with all the stuff we've been working on building over the past 5 years, and also one of the people that helps work with the community initially in our Discord, but now also on Facebook and other places, and the host of this conversation on a semi-weekly, bi-monthly, quad-monthly basis. So yeah, I mean, there's
appearances.
So I think the purpose of this show, this conversation, is just to give people some insight and access to some of the things that we're working on, some of sometimes some of the challenges that we're facing, some of the cool things that are kind of being worked on, and it gives me a chance to tease things that are coming up which I can't talk about, and then reveal things that I can talk about, which is always kind of fun as well. As Tiny tries to get me to say more than I probably should all the time as well. So I think, we've got some updates for sure since the last show. I do have some teases as well. And I'll take this opportunity to show what's coming in Kickstarter backer update for pre-code horror backers. Probably the update will go out on Monday. So if you're watching this, you'll get a little sneak peek of what we wanted to share regarding fluorescent covers. So that's a teaser to stick around a little bit later in the show. Probably the biggest news of the moment is that finally, the first piece of the pre-code horror collection has actually made it out into the world and into people's hands.
And I'm so jealous that everybody's getting theirs before me.
Yours, I am surprised it's not there already, but it will be absolutely this week. So if you're in the US, you should have this in hand this week. If you're international, then we did put a note out to international backers. We do need your phone number in order to ship these out. So people have been emailing them to us. You can do that at Kickstarter@macroverse.com. Or better yet is to update your backer kit profile. Make sure we have your phone number in there so that we won't run into this again as we're shipping the next piece of all of this. But we'll be shipping international orders over basically every 24 to 48 hours. Whatever we have, we'll send out as far as phone numbers go. So that was a unexpected thing. One thing I can say about this project, and it probably shows in the patience of all of the backers and supporters, is we have learned something at every step of this process that will be applied to everything going forward. And this is just the last small example of that, where, you know, we've had months of conversations around what we would need to do for fulfillment, and then it doesn't matter how much you prepare for it, you don't know, like, we need phone numbers for international shipping.
It's so funny. Like I live by the fact that like I don't plan much, and I get hated, but I tell people, I'm like, every time you have a plan, something goes wrong, and you've got to have plan B or plan C. So
we're at plan Z right now. What happens after Z? Do we roll over into
so I just kind of
numbers or rooms?
We go.
But regardless of all of that, you know, this is the thing, and you've heard me say this many times. Like, you know, my superpower as a creator, as a founder, all of this is just to figure stuff out. And so, you know, we have all of these dots that we've connected, and lots of things that some people will start to kind of connect those dots around as more of it is revealed. But you know, there is a master plan to all of this, and there that doesn't mean it won't change along the way, as it always does. But you know, I will say, you know, if any, I see 10 people are watching the stream right now. If any of you are backers, then, you know, let me just take this live opportunity to say, you know, how much I recognize and appreciate the frustration and the patience in this process, because I think there have been some comments, and I'll just take the opportunity to address a couple of those things. So before I do that specifically, these are out. You know, some people will notice we created these very cool kind of branded boards for them.
What exactly are those, Evan? Because
we're gonna talk about that as well. Okay. But I want to get to that in a second. So, you know, if you are
not to interrupt too, I know in the past you couldn't see the comments.
I can see that Ricky's comment, and Ricky, I'll address this directly to you.
Just making sure.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, there are a few of these things which I either can't or don't want to get completely into the weeds about, just because we have done so much ridiculous work on putting all this together, and some of it is kind of special proprietary stuff. It's like we have figured out how to do this in a way that I don't believe there's anyone else on the planet that either knows how to do it or can put these pieces together. And that's honestly been a big part of what's taken so long. So just to kind of back up for a second, you know, I'm going to do a full post-mortem where I'll get into more of these details, and we can show some of the process and really kind of make it a fun, interactive thing after we get stuff into people's hands. So right now we're just dead focused on like getting these out the door. And Ricky, I promise I will get to this question. But we literally spent 2 years figuring out how to do this before we launched the Kickstarter. And so, you know, people have sometimes, you know, popped up, and rightly so, been like, oh, you guys did this without a plan. I'm like, I wish we had done this without a plan. That would actually give us an excuse. But no, we had a very, very real plan. I think there are two things that we really didn't account for properly, and you know, definitely take the responsibility for this. One is, we didn't fully understand what it was going to take to do the level of restoration and reproduction that we've actually been able to now accomplish. We had gone into this having produced a number of test pages and really spending a lot of time figuring out the process, working with these old books. How do we scan them and capture the images? You know, how do we do the restoration so that we could reprint them at a quality level that, you know, would be as close to the original printing as possible, figuring out the paper stock, literally working with printers to find the right machinery to print them on, like the right inks and paper and all those components. So we had done all the work to figure out what are all the pieces and how could we do it, validate that we could do it. And then quite honestly, what we didn't account for was we're doing 70 books. Those books range from 34 pages to 64 pages. That's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages. And while we had nailed it on our samples, what we found as we actually acquired all of these books, these are 70, 80-year-old books. Some of them are in very good condition and are relatively easy to go through the process to restore. Some of them are in much worse condition and take a lot more work and effort to restore. And so what we started with, and again, I actually, can't wait to kind of show, and I will show some of the early samples, so that some of what we learned along the way to kind of what you'll actually see in the final product. Many of these books we've actually done now 3 or 4 different times as we've learned more through this process. And so, there is a world where we could have 2 months ago just been like, ship it. And we didn't, we ultimately decided like we only get one chance at this, like because of the roadmap that we have for authentic editions and for this process and going from pre-code to Archie to the next projects. And, there's a very ambitious, roadmap for this. If we don't give you something that lives up to the promise that we made or isn't at that quality bar, we fail.
There will be no roadmap.
We also fail by being late, but at the end of the day, if you get something awesome and it took, 6 months longer than we expected, 7, 8 months longer than we expected, to get it to you, that sucks. And we hate that. And you hate that. And, it's not what we wanted. It's not what we expected. It may seem crazy to think like, oh, we launched this in October and we thought we would ship it in December. We really did think we were going to ship it in December. Yeah. And then we realized, as we got into it, that wasn't going to be possible. So we solved all the production problems, and then, a whole other round of things came up around the printing and the printer. I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but one of the printers that we had worked with to develop this whole process, basically said there are some weird things in the collection. Not all the books are the same sizes. This is an era of comics where, some books in the same series, you'll see it when you get it. And in the same series, there are some books which are 34 pages. And then the next issue is 48 pages. And the next issue is 54 pages, which is not a thing. We had a whole back and forth with the printer about, would they print a 54-page book? Could they print a 54-page book? What happens if they say, no, they won't print a 54-page book? Do we add extra ads in there? We don't want to do that. That's not the spirit of the project. And so there have been a number of these things which have kind of popped up that we really couldn't, and at least I don't see how we could have foreseen or planned for. And so we've just had to work with our team and with each of the people in the, kind of overall chain, from, the production side to the printing side to the fulfillment side, to make sure that we could do all these things the way that we want to do them. The only silver lining to all of that is that it does make Archie and then, future things that we're planning much smoother. We'll have gone through all of this. So now we know how long does it take for us to produce these books, and we can plan and communicate that accordingly. We've now gotten it to a point where we can scale that up a bit so that we can move through it a lot quicker when we launch, future projects. And so finally, Ricky, getting back to your question, the question is, what's the holdup on the paper? How long do you think it'll take to get copies? So the holdup on the paper is 2 things. One is we are using a very particular kind of paper, which is not generally stocked. So this is not something that is just like, oh, it's on the floor, print it. It has to be ordered. It has to be sourced. We've gone through, one of the things that came up as we, initially started to head towards printing was, again, this is something that I want to be careful about because of people that are not us, that do phenomenal work, but ran into a challenge with trying to fulfill this for us and this piece of it. So we basically had to change how we were sourcing the paper. We have now, like, each one of these things we've solved. So we've had to kind of go through this process. And when I have said in updates, we're working on this every day, we are literally on the phone with the printer every single day, like going through like, okay, what do we do for this? And how do we solve that? And where are we with the final, quotes and the final order and all of that. So this paper, by the way, you can only order by the truckload. So there is no like way to get like, let's get a little bit and just do this piece or whatever. So part of it, which literally is the last thing we're just figured out this week, is, do we need one truckload or do we need 2 truckloads? So that has now, the order is in. We're waiting for the Now, basically, we're waiting for the plant to tell us, is it going to take 2 weeks or is it going to take 3 weeks or 4 weeks for the paper to arrive at the printer? So what we're being told is 2 to 4 weeks we'll have paper. That will let us go on press. Hopefully we'll be able to plan for going on press the moment the paper arrives. But, we are in the midst of a printer that's doing other jobs as well. So, we'll have to hear back from them. Once we know the paper's going to arrive at this time, then we'll be able to schedule a printing date. Then we'll be on press. There are some things around the foils and the fluorescents. One thing that people may not know who are not familiar with printing is that, printing regular comics, they all print and dry pretty quickly. For foils and the fluorescents, which are going to be incredibly cool, there's a longer period where they actually have to cure before you can pack them, or else they'll be damaged. So they take about a week after they've been printed to fully dry and cure and be able to be packed where they're not smearing or being damaged in transit. So we're also kind of figuring out, can we ship the regular sets? We probably will end up doing this. We'll ship the regular sets to the fulfillment company. They can be kitting and putting all the boxes together while the fluorescents and the foils are curing, and then those may do a fast follow. And then we have to work with the fulfillment company to decide, does it make sense based on the orders and the combinations of packages? Does it make sense to just send the base set to everyone that just got the base set? Do we need to wait till the other, at least Frightening 15s arrive so that those get packaged together? So there's just so many logistics involved in this that it seems like, why haven't you guys just sent this stuff out? And we totally understand that. But I don't think people have, partly because, this is all stuff we've had to learn. Even just think about, the 15 books, we're printing 70 books, but then we've got 15 books in 3 different flavors in different collectible box sets that all have to be put together. So when they get to the fulfillment center, the reason we chose this fulfillment partner is their specialty is what's called kitting. And so they'll take every book has its own SKU number, every bag has its own SKU number, every board, which you're getting a sneak preview of what the boards look like for each book. Each of the boards is paired to and married to that particular title, and we'll talk more about that as well. So each of the boards is a separate SKU number. So this company, again, the reason we chose them is they specialize in this, of being able to take this book, this board, this bag, put that together. Now that's one thing. Now we've got 15 of those. Now let's take the box that goes in, make sure it's the right box, which has its own SKU. Those 15 books go in that box. Make sure that box, which also is a 48-hour backer, gets the 48-hour backer poster. Make sure that the stretch goals that unlock the trading cards go in that package with that. There's another little piece that we haven't talked about, which also goes in that box with that. So my point in all of this is, again, I absolutely recognize the frustration and the question of like, why isn't this done? And believe me, we wanted to be launching new projects every 60 days over the course of 2025. And we have not let ourselves do that, because how could we do that when we haven't delivered this first one. But as frustrating as it is, it's driving me insane that we're sitting on like the next things that we want to do, and we absolutely can't do them until we fulfill this first project. Not just because it wouldn't be right for the customers and the backers that we have, but also, we have to make sure that this system that we're building is absolutely rock solid and will do the job for not just this project, but for literally 10 years of publishing that we're planning, coming behind this. So I hope, number one, Ricky, I hope that answers the question about the paper. Our current estimate is that based on all of that, this stuff should be starting to ship out. And it's most likely going to be the Frightening 15, probably all 3 variants of the Frightening 15 shipping out mid to late June, with a kind of fast follow with the rest of it. So that if we can do it in a couple of different batches, that will kind of help everything ultimately move a little bit faster. So that's the current plan. And then, all I can really say is that every time we have new information, we will share it. We'll keep everybody up to date. So that's what it's looking like. And again, I truly apologize for the frustration and the delay. And I cannot say how much we appreciate the support and the patience and the excitement, even about the annual that we've seen from people. We put that together because we felt like we have to do something to get to say thank you and to demonstrate that this is a real thing. I mean, we've all been involved with Kickstarter projects and other projects where they didn't ultimately deliver the thing. And so, man, I could just start to feel the like, oh, are you guys really not even a real company? Is this not a real thing? And I'm like, no, it is. I want to make sure people know that it is. And we thought this was a cool thing to do. Like, we debated, do we just print one of the books? And we're like, well, people are going to get that anyway. So let's try to create something special and something unique. And so, I hope that's received in the spirit that it was intended. It's awesome to see the excitement around it so far, and a couple of them pop up on eBay today, which I was kind of excited to see as well.
Was there more?
There's 2 of them up there right now. So going from
awesome.
I think $99 is the low price, so the other one's at $115,
which to me is like,
that's cool. I love it.
That was like perfect starting point. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. I saw, so and anybody watching that's not already done so, there is a new Facebook group for Macroverse. So definitely check that out and join in there if you're interested in updates and just, having fun with the community. But I've seen some comments in there, and I don't want to say they were negative. I just kind of read them as more on the unhappy side of them being priced so high.
Or on the eBay,
even for sale so fast. And I am like super excited about that. Like, one, it shows that they're valuable. I mean, they're not, like if people were just dumping them a day later for,
Well, we talked about this in an early episode. I mean, I'm just fascinated by this because part of the excitement in this collection to me is that we very intentionally chose, the Frightening 15 are the 15 most expensive pre-code horror books, to get a hold of. Like, Suspense number 3 is the most valuable non-Marvel DC book that exists.
Well,
so I think, there is an expectation that they're going to have some kind of secondary market life. What I wasn't sure about, and what is still remain to be seen, is, will something like the annual, which is a new creation, have, some sort of secondary market as well. And I mean, of course it'll have something, but like, what will that look like?
Well,
I
mean,
fun to watch.
I guess it can be listed for anything, and that doesn't necessarily make it.
Exactly. We got to see what does it actually sell for.
Someone's got to buy. But I mean, for me, it's cool to see that, and that especially being the first book and the annual at that. Yeah. Like, what are those, top sellers going to be listed at?
I mean, well, and we talked about this months ago. I remember, there's still a real open question to me, and I have my own theory about it. And it's just one of the things I'm going to be fascinated to watch as these do hit the market is that, does it drive the price of the originals up higher, which is actually kind of my theory, is that it will actually make the originals more desirable, or does it, somehow by being more available, does it make that less desirable? I don't think that's going to be the case. It may actually have no impact at all, but I think it's a fascinating, thing to look at. And it kind of goes back to part of our inspiration and desire for doing this is, as we've said, it's like, what I'm excited about is most people, I suspect even most of the backers for the campaign, have literally never seen the insides or read these books. You've seen the covers, but they're all slabbed. They're all
probably not even scans.
Exactly. And even the scans you can find online for some of them are just horrendous quality. They're Xeroxes, basically. So the comparison, I mean, it's every once in a while I can't help myself, but I go look at, like, what is a page from Chamber of Chills 19 look like, online versus the now pristine version of it that we restored. And it's pretty shocking. We've been going through all the covers over the past couple of days, just doing any final checks on occasionally we'll, one of the things we've done is periodically kind of go back and review things again, because we get better at this process. And so, early on that made us redo a bunch of them over and over again. But now we can kind of go back and go like, oh, there, now we know how to get rid of this extra little, artifact that shouldn't be there. And we'll try to do that little cleanup. We've got this time that we haven't been able to print. Let's keep making it better along the way. So I've been doing a lot of that kind of over this past week. The boxes are all done and look amazing. Everything else is kind of, other than the books, which are waiting on the paper, all the other pieces are just kind of sitting at the printer waiting for us to pull the trigger. And the only reason we're not printing those yet, just as a FYI, is, we also are balancing when everything arrives at the fulfillment center, so that they're not just sitting on a shelf there, but they're kind of getting everything around the same time to be able to do that kitting process. So it's an adventure. Most of my career prior to Macroverse has been, on the originally on the illustration side. I was originally an illustrator, and then designer, creative director, maker of things, but mostly the majority in the digital world. And so this is working with physical things is a little different. Fortunately, we have we have some key people on our team that have a huge amount of experience in this world. And really deeply understand publishing, and that's part of why the frustration, again, well warranted. Ultimately, it is all my responsibility here at the end of the day. But there could not be someone that would have signed off on this that would know more about the how we thought it would work and how it should work than our head of publishing. So it's again, it ultimately goes back to, for me, it's like, I think we've taken forever to deliver something, but I think when it is delivered, like, we've really truly figured out something that I don't think anyone else can do. And so I think as people see that, hopefully we'll get a little goodwill back for Archie and then the next projects. And Ricky, I do see your second question about what are future projects, and I'm gonna dodge that elegantly while just saying that we've got some really exciting stuff coming up. So it's a combination of things as you get to know Macroverse more. Authentic Editions, this not reprint, but this kind of restoration, I consider it kind of part product, part art restoration project. This will continue across other collections. We'll do more Archie, we'll do more Precode, we'll do more of all of those kinds of things. And then quite honestly, without naming names, we're talking to everyone in the comics industry about, what we could do in that along those lines. But I think that
one of those things, I hate to cut you off again, but you're not just chasing the paper down and organizing this stuff and that stuff. I mean, it's full blown meetings. Finding other people to talk to. I mean, you guys are working all day, every day. So
oh yeah, no doubt about that. The coffee is flowing, but it's that's not an excuse either. It's like we're a company, so there's business development stuff going on, there's production stuff going on, there's the meetings that need to take place, the tests that need to take place. And then, I think we're a little unique as a company in that we are focused on authentic editions. And a lot of our focus is and has been on solving these problems to get these things out into the world. But in the meantime, we delivered a Wu-Tang album, which, sold out on Record Store Day last month. And they and those came out amazing. And and that was one where here's what I think it comes down to is it's a materials, there's a process and materials X factor to authentic editions, which has made it challenging, but it's also what makes it special. And then you've got other stuff like, we've delivered now 5 covers for Titan Comics series called Heat Seeker with our mixed print style, which is the same thing that we did for the Wu-Tang album. And there's more stuff coming in that arena. Our digital platform is in the alpha testing stage right now, but oh my gosh, do we have some incredibly fun stuff coming.
Wait, because it's already fun.
Over the course of this year. I mean, this year is going to be a real, coming out party. So really, like, the constraint to all of this is like getting Horror and Archie and the rest of all of it in people's hands, because that's where we can actually tie all these things together and demonstrate this vision that we have for, how do we take all of the components, all of the stakeholders, all the elements of the comics industry and bring them into one really elegant new ecosystem that we think will be fun for fans, fun for creators, fun for publishers, and ways that we can tie all these things together in a way that, frankly, I think the comics industry desperately needs right now.
Oh, big time.
And we have the small ambition of kind of being the center point or the hub or the thing that can take this industry to the next level. And I know it sounds ambitious, and it is, but it is what we're going to do. So these pieces are all parts of that, all parts of that puzzle. So
before we move on to some examples and stuff like that, a little more questions that I've seen.
Absolutely.
And this is floating around the Discord, even though it's slowed down a little bit. There's some people coming in that are newer or older and coming back that I haven't seen regulars, and they've got some questions, and some of those revolve around like GSA stories and the other stories that have yet to been released. I know they're doing the Wanderers
Wanderer stories are coming out on Drip House. Yep.
On Drip House.
Which actually we're a week behind there, actually, due to some of the other stuff that we've been working on. So any Wanderers here watching, you'll get a double dose for the next release.
But so that was kind of a question, is like, what was the status of those? Will they still be released? What's going on? What's the future of like the writing side of the community? Because that's kind of how it was based.
And
then the other thing I'm seeing is, with everything being more physical based now, and then that mixed print side of things, I don't want to take any digital aspect away or anything like that. Questions of the Web3 side, where does that stand? I mean, other than NFTs, where does does that still exist in the Macroverse minds, or is it more moving that completely?
Now I need to give a bunch of context for anyone that's newer to what we're up to. So one of the things we started Macroverse 5 years ago. There's the basic evolution of it is, we started with a mobile app. That mobile app is still live. So if anyone hasn't bumped into the mobile app, it's on iOS and Android. If you search Macroverse, you'll find it. We started with inventing a new digital comics format, which we still believe is the best that's ever been invented. Humble. But
I would still tell everybody to get the app and jump on it, especially because there is amazing.
Absolutely. So, we launched 1,000 episodes of content on the app. So go grab it for your phones. We started as a subscription service. And then as we've kind of developed and evolved as a company, right now, everything on the app is free. So there's a ton of awesome content from, both indie creators and mainstream creators and some publishers, that are all on the app. Including some original content that we, created and produced. So, I started, both as I had a branding and media agency for a while, and then I spent a decade writing, directing, and producing content for games and all kinds of new media and comics, and produced the Boondock Saints graphic novels as kind of my way back into the comics industry now 15 years ago, seems.
I just watched that movie again like 3 days ago.
So good. I know, it's so good. So yeah, we could have a whole Boondock Saints conversation and probably as well. So that kind of brought me back to comics, and I'll try to do the short version of this. But doing the Boondock Saints graphic novel series, lifelong comics fan before that, but that brought me back into the actual industry part of it. And what I saw even 15 years ago was that all of the rest of media was figuring out digital, and comics just have never been able to or been willing to figure out like what is a digital strategy that makes sense. And so part of the earliest conception of Macroverse was thinking about like, what is it that makes comics special and unique, and what do I love about comics? And it's the art and the story, of course, but it's also the ability to collect something that you care about and to have that experience. And I have my 25 or 30 long boxes of comics that I've, been collecting since I was 6 years old or 7 years old. And, starting on the spinner rack at the gas station to comic stores to, all of us have the story where some version of the story where, I'm holding Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 in my hand at the comic store and go like, no, I'm getting, Spider-Man instead or whatever. And then later wishing I had picked that up. I've got my, 10 copies of every Image launch book in every variant that existed at the time, and I'm happy for it. I got my bagged copies of X-Force with Deadpool and all of that good stuff. I got all of my, Todd toys, not even talking McFarlane toys, talking Todd toys. If you know, you know. So like I am I'm a collector at heart. I'm a creator at heart. And I care deeply about the creator side of the comics industry. I care about the fan side of the industry, the collector part of the industry. And so, even in the earliest iterations of Macroverse, it was like, how do we do this where there's digital and there's kind of looking to the future and all the things that digital brings as far as access and the ability to have your stuff with you everywhere, and being able to be creative with storytelling in a way that you can't do in print. And so if you check out the app, I think what we really cracked with what we call our tap story format is doing something that's still true to the art form and to the medium. It's what comics are. This find previous episodes. I've got, hours of conversation about this, but it's the juxtaposition of words and pictures in a specific way that makes comics. It's why comics are different than movies. It's why comics are different than, animation. It's the uniqueness of the art form, and really getting into how do you evolve that in a medium that provides a different experience, but is still true to the core of what the medium is. And so that's what I think we solved with the mobile app. And then, like so many people in the early days of the pandemic, this notion of digital ownership, the concept of what made, kind of the idea of NFTs exciting in the early days, we had in our very first pitch deck for Macroverse digital collectability. And we're like, how do you do that? Like, there's no real way to do that. And so that idea of being able to verify something that you could actually own something digitally, kind of circled that for us. And like, if you could take this new format and marry that with digital collectability and do that in a way that, people could truly own these things. And then you could do all kinds of interesting types of additional, pointing towards a couple things that we still are thinking a lot about, like how do you then tie that to other things that are kind of a chain cause and effect of like, you do this, you get that, you got that, you get this, like being able to kind of create different types of experiences that actually, even at the end of the day, having gone through, we actually invented kind of the first digital collectible format that contained, we figured out a way to take all the content and push it into a digital collectible container, and then we managed to do it right as everything about NFTs was falling off of a cliff and nobody really cared, and everybody realized that the culture was kind of toxic and us too. And so, we created this really interesting technology, but really no good use case for it. No good. There's really no market for it. And so, what's useful about that is I think all the things we learned in that process around being able to tie these different kinds of experiences together. And so while it's all part of this journey that kind of leads to, I think, this now what I consider kind of version 3 of the Macroverse platform or Macroverse as a company is now being able to holistically look at this idea of being able to own both digital things and physical things and connect those dots together in unique and interesting ways, and to put fandom at the center of it, not the financial part of fandom. And this is where I think all of Web3 got it wrong, including us for a time. But it's like, it's not about the speculative part of it. It's not about the financial part of it. It's about the fandom, the collecting, the community that comes from that experience. And, if any comic collector will know, it's like, yeah, you are sometimes buying that book because I my whole collection is one for me, one to read, one to bag and board and possibly sell at some point. Do I ever sell them? I never do, but that's still always my mentality. I think a lot of collectors have that. You even seeing the annuals pop up on eBay today. I was like, a couple of people in the comments were like, well, I got one to keep and one to sell. I'm like, that's awesome. Like, absolutely. So, being able to do that, I think we've seen experiments with, trying to kind of fake it with digital things. There's millions of games or, like digital trading cards and, like Star Wars trading cards on your phone, that don't actually mean anything. So you've got this kind of mechanic of collecting, but you can't really actually do anything with it. And so you are getting me to talk about stuff I didn't want to talk about yet, but that's your job. So, as you get these and you scan the QR code, this is not just a ticket to a digital thing. It is actually a paired digital item. And so what that means is that each one of those backing boards is a unique identifier that says that particular physical issue and this particular digital edition belong together. And there's a lot of stuff that we are still building that comes off the back of that. But one of the things that we also learned is, taking all of the technology and like pushing it into the background. And you can see on the platform now, it's like, we're building a lot of things or squashing a lot of bugs. This is the baby version of everything that you're seeing right now. But it's very fast and it's very smooth and it's very seamless and it feels very familiar. And that is, very intentional to create these experiences where the tech just disappears and it really focuses on what can you now do that you couldn't do before. And so, we are months away from any sort of ability to like trade things or, you know, do other things on top of some of the kind of fundamentals that we've built. But it opens up some really interesting, fun, you know, really fandom and creator and publishing opportunities. And we've got some, you know, we've got some great partners that we'll be able to announce pretty soon. We've got some great creators that we'll be able to announce pretty soon. So while, you know, a lot of you are kind of getting to know us through this lens of Authentic Editions, you know, our ambition is to do kind of everything related to comics, and then ultimately even more beyond comics, you know, starting with music, which we kind of fell into as well. So,
yeah.
You know, so I hope that gives a little context and color to that. And then now with that in place, so that, you know, people that aren't familiar with some of the history aren't just lost as I now answered the question. My very long-winded way of getting back to that. So, you know, in part of that journey is, you know, we did both build and launch and also then acquire a handful of what I consider character collections, but collections of digital characters or, you know, NFT characters. And what we spent a good amount of time doing, and I still have this belief in this thesis, is that, you know, the excitement for people that love this material, the opportunity for people that love this material to then create on top of it. I consider it kind of a platform for, you could call it fan fiction, but if you think about a platform for fan fiction where that fan fiction is allowed and encouraged and desired by the original creator of the material, and then that fan fiction can become canonical and become real and become recognized and become monetized for the people that contribute to it and contribute to expanding the world of that universe, that material. So, you know, I'm not saying this will happen, but if you could imagine a time and a place where, you know, Spider-Man, your Spider-Man collection lives here, and then there's also an opportunity to pitch your own Spider-Man stories, and, you know, someone at Marvel goes, that's a great idea. Boom. Now it's published. Boom. Here's a check. Like, you know, that's a little bit of what we were working on previously. And so, you know, we created a bunch of content kind of with those ideas that you could own your own characters in these particular universes, create content with those characters, see those things become published. And so in the falling off a cliff of, you know, basically all of the Web3 stuff, and then our pivot kind of in this new direction, or kind of, you know, tangential direction, those concepts are still there. And so the specific answer to the question is, you know, those things will never just be tossed aside, but they have to kind of come back in at a time and a place where it makes sense. And so, you know, we created a bunch of really awesome content. I wanted to be out in the world, but it doesn't make sense to put it out into the world that way. It makes sense to put it into the world this way, where, you know, it can be found and discovered and enjoyed and ideally connect with an audience in the way that we would want it to. And I think, you know, any of the creators would want it to as well. So does that answer that question sort of in a very long-winded way?
Yeah, no, I think definitely. Well, one, I think, you know, the long-winded is anyone that's just tuning in, it's good for them to hear where things kind of have come from and developed from. And again, touching on history, that's, you know, how Eben and I met. And I think where this kind of like dialogue started was on Discord, you know, years ago, and it would just be more audio, and we would do a lot of the same thing and get updates and stuff like that. I think I like where it's headed, you know, I like the Facebook and I like the way things are going. But no, I think as far as answering the questions, I you know, I kind of already knew the answers.
Yeah.
I think people definitely kind of would love to hear it out of your mouth. So yes, I think that it does.
It's been on my mind to circle back around to that, so I'm not sad that it came up tonight as well. You know,
and always tell people, there's a time and a place, and nothing's forgotten and that kind of thing. But like, for instance, today someone was in the Discord asking about another project that's doing like Bitcoin comics or something, and I wanted to be like,
we're not doing any of that. Yeah,
it's not gonna happen,
yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah. So I think, yeah, definitely hit on exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah.
I want to see a little bit more of that book before we're out of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple things actually. So you made me think of two things. So, one of the things that we did a lot of is storytelling. And so again, like I spent a decade writing, directing, and producing content. Myself and my co-founder Adam, he and I have been writing partners and creative partners for 20 years at this point, which is just an insane thing for someone to say. But yeah, we started this in that context of like, if you could own a character in this world, who is that character? What story do they have to tell? How do they fit into the canon of the larger universe? How do you then turn that into in most cases, short comic that could then be the kind of the pilot episode for a longer series? So there is a whole, what we call Storytelling 101 series of classes that we did with the community over a few different sessions in the Discord that are just kind of archived there. So if anyone who's watching this is interested in revisiting that from, just the perspective of, how do you wrap your head around figuring out who a character is? How do you tell a story with that character? What does that look like as a comic? Like, there's a lot of material that we did
inside of there. I mean, even as I remember, there's PDFs and different things as far as like, storyline breakdowns and character breakdowns, stuff like that. So
exactly. So if anyone watching is interested in that process, or would like to kind of dive deeper into telling your own stories, creating your own characters, that's always going to be part of what we are ultimately all about. And that there's a little bit of a treasure trove there, if I dare say so myself. So want to make that available. Discord.macroverse.gg. Is that right? Yeah. Or macroverse.discord.gg. There you go. Or is it? Wait a second, man. That really tells me something. It's been a minute.
It's been too long.
We've been in the Facebook group. That really does tell you something. Hold on, let me look it up real quickly. There we go. So yeah, if you're interested in the discord.gg/Macroverse, there you go. It's one of those combinations. So that material is all there archived, and it is pretty cool for that purpose.
And some super cool stories too.
Super cool stories. I mean, that's the thing that I love the most, and really can't wait to be able to bring them back out, is some really great material that was all generated by the community with some guidance, from us. So on that side, yes, absolutely. Along those lines, anyone who has been engaging with us on the Facebook group, in particular in this alpha group at the moment, we're doing a daily badge redemption on the Macroverse platform. So we have basically there's a meta narrative to this Macroverse concept about kind of exploring the Macroverse. It's the multiverse, but only bigger and cooler. So this, in my mind, the idea of collecting these badges is that you're an explorer, you're out exploring, this Macroverse, and you're coming back from those adventures with these different badges. And so you can see in each of the badges, there's an icon or an illustration that suggests some kind of narrative. So, yesterday's was a portal to a kind of sunny, nice beach sort of environment. Today's is a portal to, I think you could only say hell. So if you imagine going on adventures to these different places and returning with this reward as a Macronaut who survived your adventure, each of those badges, very intentionally, we tend to do everything for some reason. And that reason in this case is to suggest stories. And so there will, at some point, we'll probably start it in the Facebook group and then expand it beyond there. There will at some point be a chance to propose what those stories are for those different adventures. So it's just one of the ways that comes full circle to the thing you're talking about. So definitely collect your badges. Right now, they're daily rewards for people that are participating on the platform and in the group. There's going to be, you'll also notice when you log in, you can claim XP on the platform every 6 hours. There will be stuff you can start to do with that XP literally within the next 48 hours. That will
on those backer updates, watch those too, because there's
definitely watch the backer updates. So there's
stuff that gets snuck in there.
There's a lot coming. So it's an exciting time, despite all of the other stuff we were talking about with the delays and the frustrations. There's also a lot of exciting stuff going on. So now talking about exciting stuff. So yes, I can for anyone who hasn't gotten your annual yet, and if you're outside of the U.S., apologies for it taking a little bit longer. But this is it did come out really good, if I dare say so myself. So this is the first.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What'd you do for ads in the annual?
Oh, so this is, what I think is fun about this is as a product of its time, I get such a kick out of this. Like the stories are great. The artwork is phenomenal. I am constantly saying to our team internally, finding things in these books, and actually I'll come to an example here. Like one of the stories in here that I absolutely love. The sophistication of the artwork and the storytelling and in these books is actually shockingly good. And I think, I always appreciated comics from this era, this, golden age, time frame. But I also think many people, and certainly myself, like who hadn't seen a lot of this material prior to getting into this project, there's sort of a association with golden age comics as a more rudimentary or a kind of cruder quality of drawing or storytelling, a kind of earlier version of that. And certainly some of that is true, but in this collection from Chamber of Chills, which is, almost every story in there is just phenomenally well drawn. And then some of the stuff I even shared in the group, like there's, as we're going through issues of Punch and Suspense, like, there are things in Punch comics where I'm like, you think of this as like an Image thing. Like there are big figures like breaking the panel borders and these like, unusual layouts, but really good, careful storytelling where, you've got the kind of Z layout of the page where it's, this thing leads you across to the next page. And then the seagull's wing brings you back to the final panel, which makes you then want to turn the page. Like very sophisticated, very well executed drawing and storytelling in these things from 80 years ago. And I mean, not to knock any modern comics, but dude, like we could go back and learn something. I will also say, as my favorite artist and biggest inspiration, especially to the earliest part of my career, in the comic side of things, has always been Art Adams. And next time I see Art, I gotta ask him, like, there is figure work and stylization happening in some of the Punch comics, in particular, some of the Rocket Man stories. If that's not an influence for him, I'll be shocked. So we all know Michael Golden is an influence, but maybe it's Michael Golden's influence, which then becomes Art Adams' influence. It's incredible. Like the stuff that's in this collection is really truly stunning, and it's not just the it's the artwork, it's the storytelling, it's the subject matter, it's the taboo nature of all of it due to the Senate hearings and all of that, and then the ads add this kind of element which brings a real kind of time capsule snapshot, time and a place and a moment. It really is kind of transporting into this moment in time. And it's fascinating to me because you literally have a glimpse at who these comics were for. Like you wouldn't just randomly put ads in these if you didn't think advertisers wouldn't put ads in them that they didn't think were going to hit someone that might buy these things. And so we think of ads from the early days of comics as like, the sea monkeys and, things that are very specifically like, kids, go ask your parents for this. But these are full of like, you got a hernia, here's how you can fix it. Women's undergarments, lots of how do you get more muscles, and all kinds of stuff.
On the actual annual, did you guys have, because I mean, I know like you're limited to so much content as far as what books you have and stuff like that. With the annual, are you recycling those?
Yeah, so what we did for the annual is it's a remix basically. So we took the whole body of Chamber of Chills, those there's 24 issues of Chamber of Chills. Actually, is that right? There's 4 of them which are numbered weird. So I think it's 24 or maybe it's 32 issues. I have to go back and double check, but there's 20 something, I believe, issues of Chamber of Chills. And we went through the whole collection and basically curated 7 stories. And we kind of looked at it through the lens of how these books are traditionally formatted. So there's usually a lead story, which is a longer story. There are several short stories. There are a couple of prose stories. So a lot of these books have, short stories just in prose. There are single page kind of gags. So they do this thing called chilly chamber music, where it's basically taking songs of the time and then rewriting the lyrics with, kind of horror puns and then illustrating those. And typically there are kind of 2 of those on a page. So we took the format and then doubled it. So instead of a 32-page book, it's a 64-page book.
I was gonna say, it looks, when you hold it up, it looks
it's like a little mini graphic novel, square bound. It's 64 pages, but on this kind of thicker paper, newsprint paper. So it follows that format. So it's a remix from across the entire collection. So it isn't like we just took like these 2 books and shoved them together. It's like we curated the kind of collection of stories, and then we curated the selection of ads that would kind of fit across the double size issue. So it's like we try to spend some time figuring out things that we think are going to be genuinely cool, and hopefully we.
And not only that, send it out for free.
Well, the least we could do, given the delays.
Oh man, I'm excited. I'm really excited about it.
And so I think I will have to kind of run shortly, but the last thing I wanted to show, and this is a sneak peek into the next backer update. So we talked about fluorescence. And we had the idea of doing fluorescence, which we thought made a ton of sense for the collection, being pre-code horror.
Yep.
But when it got down to it, it's just one of those things where it's like, if you think about and do a little Google search when we're done here at comic book fluorescent covers, and what you'll notice is that 99% of them, it's one fluorescent color. So like probably at least in my mind, one of the most recognizable ones is I can't remember what number, but there's a Incredible Hulk. I believe it's a Dale Keown cover with this kind of field of fluorescent green. So very striking, very, very cool cover, but it tends to be one fluorescent. And the reason for that is in the printers, you're basically adding a 5th color. So traditional printing is CMYK. There's 4 colors. That the reason that the old comics have the misregistration, and part of what I think is so iconic about them, and part of what we've actually spent a insane amount of time protecting, weirdly, is like we're not cleaning that stuff up. We're making sure it's all there because it's such a part of the look of the books, is the fact that the plates, as they print the 4 different colors over the top of each other, get misregistered. And so that's why you get like a little bit of yellow over here, a little bit of red over here. So, in that process, there's 4 colors, and then there's typically a 5th color, which is the fluorescent. And we didn't want to do that. We're like, the reason that works so well usually is because you've designed the cover, like this Hulk cover that I'm thinking about. You've designed it for that big open field of kind of shocking bright ink. But these are these beautiful illustrations that are fully rendered and intended to be this, 4-color illustration. They're not intended to have just a, splash of yellow or a splash of green.
Yeah.
And so, we went to the printer and like, what else can we do? And so, we came up with a few different tests. So we actually ran 4 different tests. And, this one, which did not come out very well. So, I'm glad we tested it. So this is the idea of taking, and then we did these as kind of thumbnails so we could see a whole batch of them.
Yeah.
But, we took, this is the idea of like the regular cover with, in this case, green fluorescent kind of as an overlay over the top. And I don't know if you can see them that well here, but like not loving that, quite frankly. Like, doesn't really do what we wanted it to do. So that one was pretty much immediately a no. And then we had the another idea of actually this is just the regular 4-color printing. So just as a point of comparison. But man, these are so cool. So that was again, point of comparison. So then we had the idea of like, what if we actually dropped out one of the colors to make it give
a second color,
kind of to kind of give it a unique look and feel. And then in that scenario, we could really focus on something that would have a little more of that Hulk-like feeling to it. So if we identified, in this case, the magenta as the thing that would be fluorescent, then you get this, actually quite cool effect where, you really get, and it doesn't represent well on photo or video compared to what it actually looks like. Quite, like it's much brighter and cooler, but, gets this kind of very cool effect. So that was our kind of fallback to like, if this other thing that we really want to do doesn't work, then, we'll do that. But what we really wanted to do, and again, doesn't really represent well on camera, but it's pretty damn striking in real life, is to just print them all with fluorescent ink. So you're getting, man, I'm trying to get my camera to focus here. Let's see. I don't know. Again, it's not gonna represent itself as well as it should, but so this is basically fluorescent process. They look amazing, and so it's gonna be. It's in a weird way. It's a little more subtle because it doesn't have that like, oh my god, there's a flashing green highlighter looking at me. But when you see them compared to the regular covers, it's probably really obvious and it really pops. It's really cool. And so, we were hopeful. We were like fingers crossed that this would work. We literally had to convince the printer to do it because they were like, we don't think it will work. We don't want to take the chance. It's going to like mess up the machines.
Ruin the machines.
So we had to convince them to do it. They did it. It looks amazing. We've now kind of figured out how to do this. And as far as we know, it's the first time it's ever been done. So, just another little check mark for us, for the collection, for backers. Like, this is a completely new and unique thing as far as anyone has been able to tell us. So as far as the printer knows, as far as anyone that we've talked to knows, this is a first of its kind.
That's pretty sweet.
So pretty cool. And, again, I feel like, I wish I could share all of these things with all of the backers in real time as we're going through it, because it's, again, as frustrating as it is to be so late with the delivery, these kinds of things along the way, like getting to see all the samples and making sure that the paper stock is right. And, we had one test print of one of the books where it's like, well, the interiors are great, the covers suck. So, choosing a different paper stock for that. And so, it's just all of those things that go into just making sure that we really get this right. And so the fluorescents are something to be excited about. So if you backed the fluorescent set, I think you're going to be really happy. I am extremely happy that we were able to do it that way. And if you go back and look at one of our backer updates where we were saying like, we're about to get the fluorescent test, and it's like somebody was like, well, what is it? And I'm like, let me see it before I tell you what we're doing. I was fully prepared to pretend that one never existed. So but they did. They came out awesome. So anyway, that's a sneak preview for anyone watching. And then finally, because we do like to play this kind of IRL game with participation, we tried this in the last Zoom and then found that it didn't work properly. But we are going to try it again. So we have a special exclusive badge just for people that watch Tiny's Universe, this conversation, this show in the month of May. So whether it's
I can scan it live.
You can.
See if it works. I'm curious if it works live.
The problem last time is the way that Restream, which is the platform that we use for this.
Does it flip it?
No, the problem is it puts its own URL in the way of it, and the way our system works, it has to actually take you to the right URL to do the redemption. So it's doing like a pass through, and that messed up the thing. We should have tested it before we tried it. But it was a spur of the moment idea last time. So this is going to take over the screen, but if anybody wants to snap this, of course you can come back to it and pause it later. But this is good for the month of May for people that watch Tiny's Universe. I
think that was going to be like one of my first badges, and I went to go scan it. I went back and like fast forwarded the stream and like got there. Let me get this thing, and I was like,
so
it's not working. It is behind the live. Can you put it on your side?
Oh yeah, let's see. How do I do that? I believe so. Here we go. Okay, there we go. It was covered up. Yeah, that's better. Okay. Yeah, so snap a screenshot or scan it or come back to the video and pause later, but this will be a fun one. And you'll see the badge. I'm pretty happy with it. This is going to be a series as well. So every month there will be a new Tiny's Universe badge. And true to the name, you'll see what it is. But basically, it's a little glass globe that contains a tiny universe. And so
it worked for me.
Let me say, hold it up. Hold it up. There you go. Tiny's Universe for May of 2025.
That's it.
So there's your tiny universe, and every month there'll be a new one. We can do some fun stuff with that down the road as well. So there you go. That is our update. Glad we got to get into some history and some of the thinking. I think for anyone that is kind of meeting us through Kickstarter and through Authentic Editions, I hope this is actually helpful to kind of understand some context, and hopefully you're excited about where some of this is headed, because we really do have some big plans and some big ambitions, and I think some things that will really make this fun. One thing that I do want to say is, we could not value your feedback more, especially at this stage. Like, this is very early days as we're building this stuff out. So if there are things that you're seeing, both with the physical side of things and even more so on the platform, we want to hear. Like, there's a feedback button at the top of the screen right now, which is there for, like, if you run into a bug, let us know. We actually have a little bug hunter extra badge for people that report bugs. Spoiler alert. But if you find a bug, let us know. If you see something that you wish worked differently, let us know. As we start to get into different things you can do on the platform, try them out. Let us know if you like them. Let us know if you don't like them. If there's something on other digital platforms that you love, that you wish we would implement, we'd love to know that. If there are things that you hate, we would love to know that. I think part of what we're trying to do is actually bridge the gap between physical and digital in a way that we haven't seen anyone else do. So we're not trying to build the next Webtoons. We're not trying to, do something that's outside of what people like to do in traditional comics. We're just trying to add to it. We're trying to bring something new to it, and we're trying to help fans and ultimately creators, and then ultimately publishers, and ultimately, kind of up and coming, creators and indies, all have an ecosystem that actually works together and also creates a place to discover new things, to interact with each other in a kind of light social way. So we're not trying to be like a replacement for social networking, but we want to be able to enable connections and conversations and actual interactions between fans and creators and publishers, and all these sort of elements. We ultimately will have a way to tie kind of a different take on crowdfunding into this, so that you can actually get things that you specifically want, and that you want them, and they're kind of, this is going to sound funny on top of everything we've just talked about being delayed on our own stuff, but being able to vet at a level that everything is actually ready to go, and the printing is set up, and the fulfillment is set up, and it's literally just almost a pre-order, kind of an automated pre-order mechanism. We've got a really interesting take on how to do that, which I think will be very great for creators and fans, and solve some of the challenges that we do have with Kickstarter. As much as we love Kickstarter, there's going to be a lot. So I'll leave that there as a little bit of a tease of things to come. But as we get into the summer, as we get to San Diego, there'll be a wave of stuff this year. And then in the back half of the year, we should see a lot of acceleration kind of on all of these things. So again, the point of all of that is, feedback is incredibly useful and welcome. Join us in the Facebook group, leave comments. I am also very available in the Facebook group right now. So if you want to ask me specific questions, by all means do so. If we want to schedule an AMA where we can live, get together and, as a larger community, kind of talk about some of the stuff that we're working on or things that you like or don't like, I'm absolutely down for that as well. So, let us know what you want to see from us, and we'll do our best to make it happen.
Real quick, I want to say what's up to David. Thanks for coming in, leaving a comment. We did touch on that a little bit earlier, not specifically on Archie, but
I can talk about Archie for a moment. So basically, everything we've had to do for Pre-Code Horror paves the way for Archie. So Archie is a fast follow to Pre-Code Horror. We'll have a more definitive timeline for that locked in as we can finally say, like, this is the printing date, this is the shipping date for Pre-Code. But basically, we're working to get everything finished and ready for Archie, so that as soon as Pre-Code prints and gets off to fulfillment, we can basically just back Archie up next to that. So, I can't say it'll be an immediate follow, but it will be a fast follow, and we'll have, again, we will have a definitive timeline for that in a way that we weren't able to have a definitive timeline for Pre-Code.
And then quickly roll into
the next thing, which will be very exciting as well. Indeed. So there you go, man. David, appreciate you coming in. Ricky, thank you for coming in, asking questions. We will be back at some time over the next 2 to 4 weeks or 1 to 4 weeks, depending on schedules.
I'm ready whenever you are. So.
We'll try to be back next week. We should have some more stuff to talk about. So around the same time,
and hopefully I'll have a book to hold up.
And you should have a book to hold up as well. Yeah. And I so appreciate the people that have posted things online so far.
Super cool.
We did design a special badge for people and a couple people have done it so far, but I love seeing it in the Facebook group, but show the world. So, make it a public post for, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, wherever your socials of choice are, and tag at Macroverse on X or Twitter, or at Macroverse HQ everywhere else. And we'll DM you a special badge redemption just for helping to spread the word. It's a cool one. It's one I actually really like. We showed it in the backer update on Kickstarter. Like help spread the word, let people know that you got this cool thing, and then also let us like we've gotten really positive feedback so far. If anybody has negative feedback, we want to hear that too. So feel free to give a full and honest review. We're learning, we're doing better on everything every step of the way. So it's valuable. We appreciate it. I appreciate it.
It just hurts me mostly.
Well, now you've just given people another motivation. But, yeah. So let's do some good. Let's make some cool stuff, and we'll be back. We'll try to be back here next week, same time. But with that, I am Eben Matthews. You can find me at Ebenverse everywhere.
Universe. Scott Pierpont on Facebook. I would say find me on Facebook now, honestly. I think that especially with the new Facebook group and everything, that's where I like to spend a lot of my time. So definitely look me up. I'm available as well if you have any questions or need anything. But till then,
have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Have a wonderful weekend. And we'll see you soon. And now I am ending.